Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am joined today by an entrepreneur that in so many ways, I feel like exemplifies the exact reason why Entrepreneur to Entrepreneur exists. Because this is someone who not only is incredibly gifted from a skills perspective and not only shows up from a place of service to others, but this is someone who has turned his hobby into a business. And I'm so excited for all of us to learn more about his journey and about his business's journey. So today's guest, his name is Lin Meyer. Lin is an IT industry professional with over a decade of experience in IT, software development, the cloud, and more. Now, he has a really interesting career journey. He started his career in 2010 by joining the United States Navy, working in one of the largest naval data centers in the world, providing IT services to the Atlantic Fleet. After leaving the Navy, Lin spent 10 plus years working for various large companies and startups as a software and infrastructure engineer, living overseas in Germany for a few years, and is now working full-time on his solopreneur business, Crucial Exams, out of the Chicago area. Outside of work, Lin enjoys several hobbies like gardening, brewing beer, and working on open source software, which I love the fact that his hobbies are so near and dear to his heart, because he actually started his business as a hobby all the way back in 2011, but this year he has now become a full-time entrepreneur. So there's so much that we're going to learn from Lin today. I'm excited about this one. Let's dive straight into my interview with Lin Meyer. All right, Lin, I am so excited that you're here with us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Very, very excited to be here. Appreciate it. That was a great intro too, by the way. Thanks.
Thank you. The reality is, Lin, I've obviously looked deep into your work. There's so much more that I could brag about that I already know the conversation is going to go some places. Like we'll be talking about app development, launches, freemium models, all that stuff. But before we get there, take us beyond the bio. Who's Lin? How did you start doing all these cool things that you get to do today?
Yeah, so I've always been really interested in computers. I grew up in a small town in northern Illinois. My parents were really encouraging, bought me a computer when I was young, really let me take apart the family computer, learn to program, learn how it worked, probably broke it any number of times. School was never really my thing, so I ended up joining the military, where I was fortunate enough to get a job as an IT. And then I got to work in a huge data center in the East Coast, which was just perfect for me. So I've always really, really loved computers and just been lucky enough that it's been able to have a good career. And yeah, I've always been very driven. So turning my hobby into work, which is something I did a month ago, was very, very exciting. And it's just been a crazy, crazy journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, especially because I personally relate so much to your journey, Lin, especially timeline-wise. So I started my first business in 2008 when I was a freshman in college, and that was just a soccer blog. Why? Because I loved writing, I love the internet, and I love soccer. So why not write about soccer on the internet? And it's crazy what it grew into. I could have never foreseen any of that. And I want you to take us back, because I know that your personal beginnings with Crucial Exams also started out from your own personal need when it came to an exam that you were prepping for. Take us back to 2011 before we talk about modern day. What the heck were you up to? What were you developing for fun?
So 2010, when I finished boot camp and I did training, I was very, very lucky that I was in the first cohort of what was called the IT of the Future program. And so this was the Navy's program switching from kind of their own in-house computer and computer networking training system to one that was based off of commercial standards. And so they were teaching, the same types of things that you would learn in college, for example. So if you were looking to get a degree in computer science, very similar. And that was new. And I was a part of the first class just by fluke based on timing. And after that, I really enjoyed the certificates. So while I was working in 2011, a year later, I had finished training. They would continue to pay for industry certs like those from Microsoft, CompTIA, or Cisco, as long as they were relevant to your job, which for me they were. So I was working frequently. A lot of times I would work the evening or the night shift in the data center, which could be busy or could be really slow. So I took that time to keep focusing and keep getting more certificates in various things from, computer hardware to networking to cybersecurity. Now, none of the certs I was really doing at the time were related to software development, but I had always enjoyed programming. So what I started doing as a way to kind of keep the studying interesting for myself was I started actually developing a platform to kind of quiz myself. So where, just think a simple app or a simple website that would ask me questions and I would answer it and it would give me a grade and say, hey, you're right or wrong. And eventually that grew to something me and other people were actually using at work in our slow days. And so I put it online. And I added Google Ads to it, and I probably took months and months, but eventually I made my first $100 and got a payout that same year in 2011, and it just sort of grew from there. But it was always something I did in the background until very recently.
Yeah, Lin, it's funny. I don't think I ask people this question very often, but I do, like I said, I relate so much to so many aspects of your entrepreneurial journey. And I guess the question that I'm dying to ask you, because I know that I feel this way, and I don't think we have this conversation openly enough in the world of entrepreneurship, is I know that I wasn't treating my business like a business out of the gates. I treated it like a hobby. Yep. And somewhere along the way, you talk about your first $100. So in 6 months, I made my first $200. Lin, I thought I was rolling in it. And so to me, that was enough for me to feel like, wait, there's at least potential here. Maybe I should start treating like a business, or at least viewing it like a business. Talk to me about that mindset, because obviously we've used the word hobby. Obviously you are fully aware now because you've helped so many people that it is a business. What did that mindset transition look like, and what helped that transition?
Yeah, man, I think it really switched to a real business a year ago. And so that's 10 years. 10 years, it was, I might tell people like, oh, it was a side gig. I used it as a way to kind of learn new paradigms or play with new technologies when in my software development career. Like if I wanted to try something out and put it on my resume, it was sort of a playground for that. But that was it. It really was just something I made some income on the side. And I really didn't take it that seriously until a year ago. And the big thing for me was that I had moved in my career to the point I really had nowhere else to go but management. But I'm a very hands-on person. I'm an engineer. I like building stuff. And so once I took on that management role, I kind of felt myself slipping away from what drove me to choose this career in the first place. And around that same time, Google Ads really started paying less. I've always kind of had a problem with it because my users are very technical. So like they know how to install an ad blocker, and I use an ad blocker too. So I totally don't blame them for that by any means. And I was just kind of talking about it with my wife, and I was like, man, I could really use like an exit strategy here. And she was very, very encouraging. And she was like, you know what you're doing? You've always been cautious about charging people and dealing with credit cards, but you deal with that stuff at work all the time. Like, why don't you give it a shot? And so I did. And I started adding features and basically putting them behind a paywall. So it was still free for a long time. And eventually it just really took off. The biggest mistake I made was pricing myself too low, both from free with ads. And even when I started charging people, the subscription was $199 a month, which was just way, way too low looking back, but live and learn.
Yeah, for sure. Is that $1.99 per month? Is that what we're talking?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just wanted to clarify that for listeners. Trust me, we've all been there. We've all undercharged. Like I said, 6 months and I closed a $200 ad deal. I was pumped. I thought $200 was so much money. And so I love that story, Lin, especially because you used the words a few times of you started to take it more seriously. And part of that is you've already shared with us that business model transition from an ad-based platform to a premium app and a real service for people who are studying for the CompTIA exam. With that in mind, I'd love to know the way that Lin, not only the software developer and someone who is incredible at what you do, but Lin, the business owner, what did taking it more seriously look like? Were you asking yourself different questions? Did you start measuring your growth and your success journey differently? I'd love to get into the mind of that view.
Yeah. I've had Google Analytics on the website forever. And then also it being ad-based, I could see how many ad displays there were and things like that. So I always kind of had some data, but I never really took it too seriously. I never tracked like a conversion or anything. I mean, it was free for a long time, so there kind of wasn't really a conversion to track, but learning metrics like that was big. In my career, most recent position, I was what's called a site reliability engineer. So I basically worked with infrastructure people and other software engineers to look at all of the data that they have on how our servers performing, what are you using for processing power, how many errors versus how many successful API calls are you getting, and things like that. And so I was pretty good at actually making graphs and looking at data and kind of cutting through the noise into to find what really helps you. And so what I did is I basically took those same tools that I used at work and I started using them for Crucial as well. And looking at things like conversion rates, looking at things like what are my users doing the most? I can guess, but CompTIA has many certs. I mean, there's A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus are the three big ones, but there's tons more out there. But if I'm going to focus on creating content, where should I focus, right? Like, what are people actually using? And not just that, but what are people that aren't paying using versus the paying customers? Because those are the ones I wanted to focus on, right? So like, are the paying customers using the website in a different way than the people who are still on the free tier? And it turns out that actually, yes, they were. And so that really drove me on what I need to focus on and where I need to improve. There's still tons of things on the platform, on the website that I want to fix, or maybe not fix, but just adjust to make better. But when you're on your own, you have to prioritize. You don't have time to do it all. So having that data and having really nice graphs and being able to really focus on the right thing is critical.
Yeah, I really appreciate those insights. Listeners, I'm going to call this out because not only is Lin being so open and transparent in the way that he thinks about business, but I think what's on display right here in our conversation is when I ask, Lin, what did it look like for you to take it more seriously? You, instead of talking about yourself taking it more seriously, you looked at your customers' data and you said, how can I more deeply serve them? And I think that that's so revealing, of course, about your success. I always say that success leaves clues, and it's no secret. So many amazing entrepreneurs, when they come on, they want to talk about their customers because that's what's going to determine the success or failure of our business. Yeah. So Lin, I love hearing those insights. I also know that when it comes to software or apps or development of anything, we hear so much different advice out there. MVP, minimum viable product, is something that we hear so much about. It sounds like you fully embrace, from a mindset perspective, the evolutionary process of life, of development, of business. And so with that in mind, I feel like it probably benefited you that it started as a hobby, that you didn't hesitate to launch this because you were playing around with your skills. You were playing around with something that served yourself. What has that process looked like, especially when you hear all that noise about MVPs and when's the right time to launch, and so many companies want to go and get seed money? What's your attitude towards all that, Lin?
I struggle with it more now because it was primarily a hobby. It was like originally there was no login, and I said, I want to learn how to build a login system, and I want to learn how to, secure my database 10 years ago so that I can store passwords. And so I was adding features based on just like what I thought would be interesting to build, and some of them got used and some of them didn't. And then as life got busier, sometimes I wouldn't be able to maintain them and I would have to take something away or turn something off. And then I would have users complain, but it was like, well, they're not paying anything and I don't have time to fix this or upgrade this or whatever. So I actually struggle more with that now in the last month since going full time. But I think my mantra is automate everything you can, but you don't need to automate everything day one, right? So whether you call it MVP or agile or what iterative software development, whatever, start small with something that you feel is a good user experience and then build up from there. And that means looking at data, that means taking user feedback. And also you may have a vision that even the customer may not see for where you want this to go, but you don't have to do it all day one because you'll never feel it's ready, I think, or at least I never feel it's ready when I look at it like that. So I try and give myself if I was a user, what would I want? And then go from there and add more over time.
Yeah, I love that insight, especially because listeners know that we always ask our guests, what's your zone of genius? And Lin, you put automation right there, and it's already come up in our conversation today. Talk to us more about automating everything, because the more mature I get as a person and as an entrepreneur, the more I realize that when we talk about scalability, a lot of it is leveraging our resources. We only have so much time. And Lin, I'm just like you in the fact that I love being hands-on in my business. I love my business. It's why I do business. And so many of our listeners can relate to that. When you talk about automating things, though, what are those things that you look to automate?
Yeah. So for me as a technical person, when I save code, I want to get it out there on my servers immediately. And that was my job in my career. So it's easy to say that's kind of an automated thing, right? But I deploy a new version of my website 3-4 times a day. And sometimes it's more focusing on content. Maybe I'm not developing or bug fixing, but that's definitely one way that I automate that. I'm not out there like installing updates on servers. I've built a process that it just rolls itself out automatically. But even in the product itself, if I want to do a deal, for example, I'll use an email campaign. And when I add that to my backend in my system, it will send that email campaign out automatically without me having to go type up an email and do it all. We've also very recently started using artificial intelligence. I know it's everybody's big thing right now. I would not say we're an AI product. I don't want us to be an AI product, but I'm using AI behind the scenes to help me kind of with creative writing, areas that, me being more engineering focused, I struggle with stuff like that. And using that as a way to automate content creation is huge, to where now instead of me sitting all day trying to think of, what's a good practice question for how to make a network or how to fix a network or something like that my users would need. And instead I can automate that, and I have hundreds and hundreds of pre-created content that I just have to kind of play like quality assurance person on. Or now instead of writing the content, I'm sort of like the editor, so I'm not blasting AI content out. I am still reviewing it. But that is so much faster than me trying to write it myself, right? So anytime I'm doing something that I'm going to do twice, I try and think like, should I automate this? And the answer is almost always yes. It may not be day one. I might still do something manually for weeks or months, but it's always in the back of my mind. Like, I don't want to hire people, right? Because that's a huge burden on a small business like mine. So instead it's, how can I automate this myself so that I never have to think about that problem ever again?
Yeah, I love those insights, especially because, again, it's that level of intentionality of, am I going to do this more than once? If so, can I and should I automate it? So it's that recognition of how you're spending your time, what you're spending your time on, and then how are you going to allocate your resources from there, which to me, I always think back to my immature days as an entrepreneur. I started as a teenager, and in my early 20s, there were a lot of things I didn't understand, and still to this day, we're all always learning. But one of those things, Lin, is that age-old advice of niche down. The riches are in the niches. And so for you, knowing how incredible you are, obviously at the technical aspect of all this, obviously when you layer on automation, scale becomes a heck of a lot more possible for you. And then when you introduce AI, it probably a lot of people would say, well, Lin, why don't you apply this to, architectural exams? You could roll that out and you could roll it out to other things, but you've really found an awesome niche. What's your experience and what's your thought process that goes around niching? Because you love your niche. It's a niche that you're familiar with. So why not expand, Lin?
It's such a good question. It's something, so I've been full-time in this for 5 weeks. I think this is week 5. But I'm already thinking about that. Because ultimately to get into, architecture or, I don't know, nursing certificates, I'm sure there's tons of other industries, right? I would need a partner who can kind of vet that information, or, I don't know, a contractor, employee, whatever. And I've really struggled with, I know that I want to do that. I don't know what direction I'll go exactly, but whether I make a new website using the same technology and basically just deploy 2 copies of my website with different content, where Crucial Exam stays the CompTIA IT World one, or maybe we add it into that same one, but then we lose that niche. And I think that's huge. And I think it's so easy to look at it and say, like, why don't you add this? Why don't you add this? Why don't you add this? And it takes away from what it is. And now my messaging on the homepage becomes a lot less clear. Right now it screams CompTIA, IT. That's who this is for. And I think if we added all of those other things, it gets muddier. But at the same time, now I'm expanding and I have more potential customers. So I'm honestly, it's something that I want to do. It's definitely on my mind. I'm still undecided exactly how I'm going to do it. And maybe I do a bit of both, maybe I go into one industry by making a whole new platform using the technology, using the same code base, but with different messages, with different content and so on. And then maybe I'll add some to the existing one and kind of see what performs better. But it's a question I'm asking myself every day right now, for sure.
Heck yes. That's the sort of real insights that I so appreciate from our guests, Lin, because listeners might think that there's always an answer to these business problems, but I think that you just portrayed in real time for us that you don't have an answer, and that's perfectly okay. But yeah, you will figure it out. And I think that's such an important part of the entrepreneurial journey, is that recognition and the okay admission of, yeah, right now I'm focusing on my lane, and here's what my lane is. There's a heck of a lot of ideas out on the peripheries, but you'll get there when you get there. So I love that attitude, which I'm sure that you also arrive there when it comes to your business model. We talked about going from an ad-based platform to the premium model. Walk us through that, because a lot of people look at software programs and platforms as well as apps, and they wonder, how the heck do I monetize this stuff? What's been your thought process there? What have you learned about it, and what's really driven your decisions to where you are today in the premium model?
Yeah, it's so we have an interesting setup, and I don't plan on keeping it like this forever. But we have a subscription that gets you full access to the platform. That's a monthly subscription, or for I think 5 or 6 times that monthly subscription price, there is a lifetime deal. That lifetime deal is what's driven most of the revenue. But I also understand that server costs and electrical costs, things like that will always exist. So that lifetime model will slowly chip away. And I can look at it right now and say like, oh, this is the profit I made. But a year from now, if that user is still using the platform, they have a lifetime deal. Like, they've already paid, and now they're only costing me money. I do think one nice thing for my area is that it is entry-level certs, so the chances of a customer coming back in a year are actually fairly slim. Some industries do require that you keep your certs up to date, especially if you work in the government or the DoD or something like that. But most people, you get the cert, it gets your foot in the door, then you have X years of experience, and you don't really need this particular cert anymore. So I don't think the lifetime deal is necessarily a bad thing, but it's been a really, really good way for me to drive revenue early on. But the ultimate goal is to have a subscription model with something like monthly subscription and yearly subscription. Another thing that really differentiates me from my competitors is that you get full access to what I have. So if you're studying for 2 certs at once, you're not paying me 2 fees. If you plan on knocking them out really quick, you could pay me for 1 month and knock out all of them, all of the certs that you want to do. Most people can't, because life, you just can't do that many, but some people really do move that quick. Whereas a lot of my competitors charge a one-time fee. And that is something that differentiates us. And that's a lot of feedback that I get from my users, is that they're always really thrilled. I really need to put it on my website as like a frequently asked question, because that's like my number one support question is, do I really get all of this? If I subscribe and you guys add something new, do I automatically get that? And the answer is simply yes. And so that subscription model is definitely, it's not unique to the SaaS world. I would say it's pretty unique to my area with IT certs and test prep, though. I don't know of anyone else who's really doing that, actually.
Yeah, it is interesting. And I think about my sister, for example. She just graduated from veterinarian school, and the amount of exams they have to take. And she did her surgical rotation in Colorado. Now she's doing her clinical year in Virginia. There's so much that goes into it, and exams every single step of the way. So it's super unique to hear the model that you've arrived at. And I think it's really customer focused. With that in mind, you talk about when you add new things, that's all baked into it, which again is just a huge benefit to them. Talk to us about those features, because I know that Crucial Exams has evolved along the way. You've rolled out new features. Yep. You take us back to the heydays of it, where you didn't even have a login page. What is your thought process when it comes to rolling out new features? Are these things that you just have a huge idea board and you pick off the ones that make sense? Or is there some sort of short-term and long-term strategy behind it all?
It's a little bit of both. There are things that I know that students will see on the real exam that we don't have yet, or that we have, but it's a little different. And the idea is, we want to give them as close to the real thing, but in a safe sandbox environment, where if they fail, they're not out $300+ and they have to go take the cert again, right? So it's often kind of, saying mimicking sounds strange, but it's often just trying to mimic what the real deal looks like. Like yesterday, for example, I redesigned our test interface to look a lot closer to what the real one, when they take the CompTIA cert, will be. And part of that is actually because now that we're no longer in an ad model, I have a lot more screen real estate to work with because I don't need to show ads, which is really nice from a user perspective. But then also sometimes it's just what do I think would be interesting as a user? It could be like, for example, it would be really cool to have like a virtual command prompt, which is, in the hacker movies, you see the guy typing the commands out, and you do see stuff like that on the test, but it's not going to be that detailed. But on the other hand, a lot of times students are really hesitant to do stuff like that on their personal computers because they don't want to break anything. So if I could make a feature that like simulates that, I think that would be huge. And I think even though that maybe isn't something that's necessarily on the test, it would also be something that would help with like word of mouth because it's just a cool feature, right? So people would be like, oh, check this out. Like, look at this cool thing. And I can safely run this command and change my, IP on this network, but it's all virtual. So it's safe and I can't actually break anything. So it's a little bit of what do I need to do to make this better for my customers? And also just like, as an IT person who does these types of exams and these certs, what would I find interesting? Look, what would stand out to me?
Yeah, that's really interesting that I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't consider when it comes to looking at your business is those two interfaces that you just talked about. Is one, you have to interface and have your finger on the pulse of the actual certification exams so that you can mimic it. And then two, you have to interface with the people who are taking the exams. Now, it helps that you've personally done it yourself as a consumer, but what does that interfacing look like? How are you making sure that you stay on top of what's going on in the exam world within these certifications? And then how are you gaining, or I wonder if you are, after the fact that they take the test, are you soliciting that feedback from them to always continually refine your offerings?
I've tried like surveys and stuff via email. I get some. I don't get anything crazy in terms of feedback. It's always just a few. What I do is I look on social media and I regularly look for people talking about crucial exams. Reddit is by far and large the most common place that I find feedback. So for example, someone complained about the app the other day and I just kind of responded and laughed like, I know it has a bug that I need to fix. And that led to like a conversation because people are suddenly like, oh, the guy that makes crucial exams is on Reddit reading these. But most often it's good feedback and it's people saying like, wow, is this really like, can I really get this for this much a month? Or what did you use to study? And people say, oh, I used these videos and then I used crucial exams once I got close to test prep. But not just that, I see also the people who don't use me and what are they using and what did they like about it. So just keeping up with customers via public channels like social media has probably been the most helpful because I just haven't seen a great response rate from things like surveys and stuff like that.
Yeah, I really personally really appreciate those insights. It sounds like you and I share a similar jadedness when it comes to surveys. And the reality is, thanks to Reddit, I'm a huge Redditor. It's like the only app on my phone that I actually open. Same. And the reality is, that's where you can gain town hall feedback. This is people just talking in the open, not with a bias of, oh, let me leave something because it was a really positive experience with this company or a really negative experience. It's just real life chit chat. And I think that's where the valuable insights come from. So I love that insight, Lin. I want to ask you this next question on two fronts. One, as someone who obviously is very technical and developing on a regular basis, but then two, also with your entrepreneurial hat on, you brought up AI before, and AI, everyone's talking about it in a million different ways. You've shared some of the ways that you're incorporating AI into crucial exams, but what's your take on where AI is going? And actually, you and I are having this conversation on the day that ChatGPT just announced a heck of a lot of new voice features. There's a lot of cool stuff coming. What's your take on AI, especially for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I see so many like ChatGPT wrappers or AI wrappers where it's basically an entire product that's just really like a small feature built on top of AI. I think that's like anything. I think it's a phase. You know, when crypto got really big, there was crypto businesses everywhere. I would not personally get into something like that. It's not that they don't necessarily have value. It's just, I think that as the AI companies like vertically integrate, they're going to start adding those features directly in, and you're not going to be able to compete. For me personally, I see AI as a tool that everyone should have, because it really can just turbocharge stuff. One of the things that I have, because when we use the AI to generate content, it can, you have to like treat it like a con man almost, because it will tell you these things that sound so correct. But because I'm in the IT industry, I'm like, what is this thing going on about? Like, this sounds good. The grammar's great. It's throwing out these fake acronyms that it just made up, but it's wrong. So one of the things I've done is even like, I'll take the output of one AI and I'll double check it with a different AI bot. And if they don't agree, then I'll throw the content out. So I think it's really cool. I think it will continue to improve. I think everyone should use it. But I would still be cautious on it because it is just so good at sounding right when it's not at all. But it's crazy. It's so interesting to see. And you're right, that the announcement today was really cool.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that. Almost 900 episodes in, I've never heard anyone reveal that little hack of theirs of dropping one AI output into another. That's really clever, Lin. I'm going to totally steal that from you. It reminds me of those old school prank videos where people would call a Chinese takeout restaurant with one phone and put another Chinese restaurant phone next to it and have them talk to each other. But that's the world we're living in, is bouncing AI, because what Google is doing with Gemini, or whatever the heck they call it these days, and ChatGPT,
I know.
There's so many options out there. So I love hearing how you're combining those. Along those lines, I want to talk about expansion plans, because clearly you're thinking about these things not on a micro level, but for sure on a macro level as well. I want to get inside Lin, the entrepreneur, the business owner, the visionary's mind, and hear how far of a time horizon are you looking at? Are you picturing crucial exams a year from now, 5 years from now? With technology changing so much, I imagine it's very difficult to do that. So give us some view into the way that your mind thinks about the future and expansions.
It's a tough question to answer because I don't know what exactly I'm going to do. I do plan on expanding into other areas. Right now, the immediate challenge for me is improving the product and making sure that the content that I'm focused on is up to date. And that's mostly, it's really almost like a survival thing, because I took a big pay cut leaving my job and doing this full time. And I'm married. I live in the suburbs of Chicago, which is not cheap. And I have a 2.5-year-old. So for me, it's really like, how do I ensure that come, I don't know, the fall, my revenue is not going to drop off into nothing. And once I feel safe there, I think is when I'll really start expanding. As for expanding, I've just daydreamed about it a lot. And like I said, I've debated, do I, Crucial Exams is a fairly vague name. It doesn't scream IT or CompTIA or anything like that. So do I add stuff there? Do I bring on people as contractors to kind of be like an expert in some nursing certificate or whatever? Or do I try and partner with people and I'm just kind of, the software developer and almost give them Crucial Exams as a platform, like a white label, to where they run, I don't know, nursing certs.com or something, and they really just come to me when they have like an issue, and I'm kind of more like the IT guy and the software developer, and I just get like a revenue cut and I just let them do their thing, because I'm not a marketing person, right? Like I can go on Reddit and talk IT with people and talk shop, but I really wouldn't know necessarily how to market to like someone who's looking to get into nursing. I can guess and I can probably figure it out. But someone already connected in that industry would do a lot better. And if I just hire them as a contractor to vet practice questions, they're not going to have that ownership. So I have thought about that. Like maybe we do a percentage partnership and we do a whole new platform that has its own niche with its own messaging, but under the hood, it's that same technology. I'm leaning more towards that, but when and how that happens is TBD still. I'm hoping like end of summer, I'll be happy with where I'm at with the current content, and then I can start thinking about things like that. But we'll see.
Yeah, Lin, I want to go there with you, because now that you're a full-time entrepreneur, you are a marketer. You are all of the hats now. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because I always love, towards the end of these sessions, talking to you not as a subject matter expert in your area, but also as an entrepreneur, as one of us, for every single person tuning in here today. Lin, with that in mind, what has been eye-opening for you now that you are a marketer, now that you are, a partnership and activator when it comes to all aspects of your business? Give us some of those eye-opening things as you have crossed the bridge from entrepreneur to full-time entrepreneur.
Yeah. I've tried things like Google ads, Reddit ads. I haven't tried TikTok ads yet. I keep hearing they're really great. I really got no value out of them. I got a lot of clicks and a lot of views, but not a lot of people converted. I really was surprised at how big of a money pit that was. And I'm not saying it would be a money pit for everyone, but it was for me for sure. I think I spent like 1,000 on Google ads and I converted like 3 people, which is just not enough for that to be worth it. And it could be, that my messaging is not good enough. Maybe I needed to tweak things. But unfortunately, like with that bad of conversion rate, it's just like, okay, let's look somewhere else. Being active in communities like Reddit, I plan on doing some YouTube stuff soon. That seems to be the way to go. So it seems almost like marketing myself as an individual rather than a business has really worked well. Even just talking with customers to where, their kind of attitude changes when they realize like Crucial Exams isn't a big company, it's just me. And suddenly they're much happier with it and they're like, oh, that's so cool. And it's really great that you're here. And like that's the kind of stuff that has really worked well for me. The other thing is writing blogs and posting them on LinkedIn. I do see an uptick in referrals coming from LinkedIn when I'm active on LinkedIn, meaning the LinkedIn algorithm basically sees my business's page doing things and starts showing me to more and more people. So it is unfortunately something that you have to keep up with. Google SEO is big. Maybe some people will find better results with marketing than I have, with running ads than I have. But for me, it's really just being active in communities and staying on it. Writing one blog post or posting on LinkedIn once a day or something like that has really had the biggest results for me.
Yeah, and the name of the game, you said it right there, is obviously consistency. It's actually how we came across your work. Our production team saw your stuff on LinkedIn, and we were just like, we got to have Lin on the show. He is an incredible entrepreneur who's building something. We love solopreneur businesses, and I think it's so incredible what you're doing. And today, we've seen, the proof is in the pudding. We've seen exactly why you've been able to grow Crucial Exams how you have, and gosh, I'm excited to follow your growth journey into the future, which along those lines, Lin, listeners know I ask this question at the end of every session, and I have no idea which direction you're going to take it in. And that is one takeaway for listeners here today, whether it has to do with the nature of Crucial Exams, or if you just want to talk entrepreneur to entrepreneur, what's that one message that you hope everyone who tuned in here today and feels all sorts of inspired by your insights and the way that you think, what's that one takeaway you hope they walk away with?
So my mantra, we've talked about is automate, automate, automate. Anyone who's worked with me in a outside of entrepreneurship, but just as a career person at various companies, that's always been what I said is like, guys, you need to automate this, like stop doing this by hand. And again, you don't have to do it day one. You can start small and build, but automate, automate, automate has always been something that's worked really well for me. I'm a software engineer, so it's easy to say from my perspective, but there are a lot of really cool no-code or low-code tools out there. So even if you're not a software engineer, you're not a coder or a scripter or whatever, check some of those out and start, there's lots of drag and drop things where you can, link up A to B to C. And so don't be afraid to go try those things. And, the great thing with software is if it breaks or if it doesn't work, you can just turn it off and go back to doing whatever you were doing before. So don't be afraid to take that extra time to automate something to save yourself more time in the future. It's an investment. So that would be my big takeaway. Really
solid takeaway. And you teased some actionable items in there as far as no-code tools. It's funny, for someone like me, I automate so many aspects of my business, whether it's something as simple as Zapier or even cooler tools that are using web interfaces to start mimicking human user actions. There's so many powerful things. So listeners, spoiler alert for you all is that we're going to invite Lin back for an Action Saturday episode. So stay tuned if he takes us up on that. But we're super excited to have Lin inside of our community. And Lin, along those lines, I know that listeners are going to want to go deeper into all the incredible work that you're up to with Crucial Exams. So where should they go from here, as well as your LinkedIn, where you are publishing consistent content there? Drop those links on us.
Sure. So it's crucialexams.com, and LinkedIn, our profile is Crucial Exams. And if you want to look at me, it's LinJmeyer, Lin J. Meyer at LinkedIn and Twitter.
Yes, listeners, you already know the drill. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find Lin's links. That's not so easy to say, Lin. We are making it as easy as possible for you to find Lin's links down below in the show notes. Wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode, you'll find a link to crucialexams.com, as well as the Crucial Exams LinkedIn page, as well as Lin's personal LinkedIn profile. So if you want to reach out to him and have an amazing entrepreneur in your circle, someone who is now a full-time entrepreneur, I'm so excited for you, Lin. I think it's incredible what you're up to. And on behalf of myself and all the listeners worldwide, not only do we all thank you, but we're all rooting for your success now and a heck of a long time into the future. So thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun. Really. Thank you.